Hey everyone, I am making a quick video to sort of complete a review I'm writing right here. I'm typing up a review for Dead Space 2 Severed, the new DLC for Dead Space 2, and I decided that, well, I want to talk about it, not just write about it. So I'm going to just make a quick video explaining my thoughts on the DLC for Dead Space 2. And I guess this is kind of stupid or like a little inconsiderate, since my review for Dead Space 2 is actually on my the hard drive of my camera and on my laptop. But I haven't had time to edit it because I have to edit it, cut it down, and find a good place to intersperse it, cut it off like in the middle so I can make two parts of it. It's gotten to the point where I'm pretty much expecting I'm just going to have to reshoot it, and that might be a good thing because it'll be less rambling and more just serious talk. But I am going to give this a little whirl because, well, I can't talk. I could talk for over 15 minutes about Dead Space 2 Severed, but I'm going to try and keep it under that. In fact, I got to take my cell phone here and see if I can, so I can keep track of my own time there. Yeah. So Dead Space 2 Severed is the new DLC for Dead Space 2. It came out on Tuesday, I think it was, and I was kind of excited for this because most people did not play Dead Space Extraction. A lot of people probably have played it now since it came free with the first printing of the PlayStation 3 copy of Dead Space 2. But not a lot of people played it for the original Wii, which I did, and I really liked it. It was a light gun shooter that actually had more meat on its bones than I think any other light gun shooter has had. Well, I guess Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles had a lot of meat on its bones, if you want to call it that, because it had a lot, collect data, you can get all these, supplemental information you wouldn't get in the other games through it. But with Dead Space Extraction, the big thing was that it had a story that you could, really latch onto. There were characters that were likable that you followed throughout the game, and you ended up caring about most of them. Properly caring, and that's a pretty cool thing for a light gun shooter. But, well, somehow I never thought I'd see these characters again, like the few survivors. But they're back now. When EA announced, as is modern now, to just announce it a couple of days after you release the full game, they announced that Gabe Weller and Lexine Murdoch, the survivors of Dead Space Extraction, would be back and have their own DLC for Dead Space 2. I was I see them in the main Dead Space universe. They were in the main Dead Space universe, but with this sort of gameplay style, how's Lexine gonna figure into this? She was never a fighter, and I thought it almost sounded like they wanted to have her as a playable character, which is not the case. You play as Gabe Weller through the entire of Severed. Severed is probably, depending on your difficulty setting, around 1.5. Well, actually, that's probably low. Around 2 to 3 hours in length, I'd say, for 560 Microsoft points. So I guess that's around, $6 or $7 or something. Anyway, long story short, this game is worth that money. This DLC is worth that. For anyone who liked the original Dead Space or wants to know what happened to the Extraction characters. Well, as I said, it starts out with, Gabe Weller with Gabe Weller sitting in one of the caves from the later part of Dead Space 2, contacting Lexine, who has now become his wife, telling her that she needs to get out because they've just discovered the necromorph infestation on Titan Station. And it becomes pretty standard, It's a good complimentary piece for the original game, because Gabe has only one goal. He wants to find his wife. He needs to find his wife. This is his one goal. Isaac, his goal is pretty much find out what happened and get the hell out. And even though that's a good enough goal, it's more of a classic video game goal that I'm not really that much a fan of. With Isaac, you had to run around the game, find out new information, bits and pieces, and at the end of it, just hope that enough of it made sense, or if the payoff was big enough for it to matter. And even though in most respects it was worth it, I don't really like Dead Space 2's story as much as the first game. It was sort of a disappointment. And even though this doesn't try to be as big and bombastic, there are no big explosions, or there's no big oh my god reveal at the end or anything. it doesn't try to trump the first game like Dead Space 2 did with monsters that are amazingly huge and disgusting. No, this is 2 to 3 hours worth of DLC, and you run through half of the environments are new, and yes, half of them are from the previous, like from the first real game, like Dead Space 2, and I like the entirety of it. I like the new levels. Some of them are really well designed and really well thought out. And the old ones are just as fun to visit. It's kind of just fun to see the environments. I had a hard time at first figuring out if this was supposed to be before or after Isaac had walked through these environments. But then you get to a point where Lexine is a physician, so she is in the medical ward where Isaac is, and she specifically contacts Gabe and tells Gabe that she's in the psych ward, which is where Isaac starts out in the game. So you have to make your way through this is probably the coolest part of like just the gameplay, is the fact that it plays exactly like the first game, except that Gabe has the same weapons but some different upgrades, so they have different strengths, and the plasma rifle is one of Gabe's like initial arsenal, and that's one of the weapons you use for the majority of the game. At least I did. In fact, the only weapon I actually bought was a plasma cutter. Anyway, you actually get to fight your way through the initial area. You know, when Isaac in the beginning of the game, or in Dead Space 2, he has a straitjacket on and can't fight, so you have to run away. But I was like, oh my god, I wish I could just return here and see this place, because it looks pretty well designed. And it's not really that well designed, but it's still fun to be able to fight your way through the one part of the game where you couldn't fight. And it is kind of fun to see, like, oh, the plasma cutter's gone from here where Isaac first gets the plasma cutter. That means that Isaac has been here. Oh, I remember this is where I got the stasis module. Oh, that's missing, so that means that Isaac's been here. You find the corpse of the guy that lets Isaac free and stuff like that. So yeah, it's more Dead Space, basically. As I said, it plays exactly like Dead Space 2 did. But there are, just like in Dead Space 2, there are some really cool set pieces. There is a moment where Gabe ends up hanging upside down, just like our Isaac did, by a leg, and you have to keep shooting people, like, you know, upside down, shooting them as they approach you from a tunnel. And even though it's not as hectic as in the first game, in Dead Space 2, I keep referring to it as the first game, but it almost feels like that because it's other characters. It kind of feels like it's a separate product. And I almost wish that it was. You could buy it on the Xbox Live Marketplace. But then the download would be a lot bigger since it implements other areas from the disc. But this is just really good. It's really fun to see Gabe again and Lexine. She's not in it that much. It basically becomes this weird thing where these bastards that are chasing Isaac around the entire second game are trying to kill Lexine because just like Isaac, she's one of the priority people. Just like how Isaac was, they were trying to kill him off because they've experimented on her, just like they did with Isaac and the other dude, the crazy guy that runs around with you in Dead Space 2. They've been experimenting on her, at least keeping check on her. And now that they've gotten the data they want, they're just going to kill her. So it basically just becomes a ticking clock where Gabe has to find Lexine before anyone manages to kill her. And that's a very compelling argument. Love is very seldomly used in video games as proper, motivation for action. And by the end of the game, some really almost heart-tearing stuff happens. I'm not going to say what in any way, but at the end of this game, the DLC, I actually felt kind of saddened. And I really wanted to see more, and I hope there is more, because I feel like, if anything, Lexine and Gabe's story is by far more interesting to hear than Isaac's is from now on. I mean, I almost wanted, Dead Space 2 to end with a finality that couldn't, be built upon, at least for Isaac's sake. But this ends in a way that still leaves more to be told, but it feels like if they're going to tell more about what happens to Lexine and Gabe, they have to be a little more creative. And that is a lot more interesting than just, oh, we're going to do this so we can easily just pump out the next sequel. This is the next step we have to take. And yeah, I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I really love Dead Space 2, but it was inferior to Dead Space 1. And even though I can't compare a 2 to 3 hour piece of DLC to Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 2 for that matter, I had more fun playing Dead Space 2 Severed than I did playing Dead Space 2. If you just want to, like, you know, try to scale it up. So Dead Space 2 Severed. If you have Dead Space, buy Dead Space 2 Severed, because it's an amazing piece of DLC. And if you don't have Dead Space Extraction, I don't think it's required. I think you can still enjoy it. You can still really like and latch on to Gabe and his one motivation of finding his love. It's really easy. I can't really go on a whole lot longer. Shouldn't. But anyway, great piece of DLC. Pretty cheap. Probably better than the Fable piece of DLC that came out the same day that was the same price. And, well, yeah. Try to get some more videos up soon. Bye.